So we're down here in the R&D basement, and we're in a pretty good mood because we found an unexpected bag of cookies to go with our glass of milk. We have a little different animal here today. Let's see if we can show you a couple of tricks that we use. These are the Austin Hilly Sprite MG Midget, another beloved British gearbox known as the Ribcase. Yeah, used probably till the mid-70s. Pretty widely used, really, and it's used as an upgrade for a lot of those classics when people have them now and put bigger engines in. 1275cc engines usually. Good idea to have one of these gearboxes. These ones here can be set up to be pretty durable. They have a few problems that people think they're notorious for jumping out of gear, but you know, as things wear, things like that are going to happen, and they're no more prone to that than anything else if it's in decent shape. It's a 3 synchro box, meaning first gear is kind of a crunch, designed in the British driving style of really never using first other than from a very, very dead standstill. They get wear over the years, things wear. This is another input shaft here we can show real quick. Thousands of shifts as these engage. You end up wearing little ramps on these rectangular engagement dogs, and that leads to, you know, when the engine is putting force in the direction of rotation, there is also a force that wants to spread them apart and knock them apart, because those shapes have worn into ramps. When you unload, take your foot off the gas suddenly, it can suddenly slip off the ramp and pop out of gear. When you want to make these shift nicely, obviously you can't have shift forks that are thrashed, that somebody's just been leaning on for years. They got to be nice and tight so that you don't have a lot of slop in the linkage between gates and such. But the trick we can use, this is one of the little plungers that is held under a spring here from the side. It puts a load in these little grooves as the shift fork moves between gears. We like to make a little chamfer over here and over here. That sort of makes the detent location where these shift forks want to stop a little bit deeper into the shift. Not enough to start wearing shift forks or doing funny things, but just a better click into each gear, and a little bit more effort and consistency required to pop it out of gear, back to the neutral gate and into the next gear. Now, we don't want to go crazy. I've seen people say, well, if you work on it a little bit, maybe if you hack half of it away, it'll work even better. By itself, it's not going to suddenly make a box that's all gooey everywhere shift real crisply. But when you're putting these together, it's just one of the little detail things you can do. One of the most annoying failures in these gearboxes is when these forks are able to overextend the sliders and allow the little springs and balls that give these that springiness to fly out. If those overextend, that comes out, you're done, because it's going to seize on the springs. There's little ball bearings floating around everywhere. You really have to pull it apart. There's no recovering it from the shifter. But by putting little shims, you can see one right in there, it prevents these forks from going any further than they need to. We're able to improve the reliability and consistency, hopefully keeping these in gear. So a few tricks. These have a lot in common with the minis. A lot of the gears are actually interchangeable with the 3 synchro mini gearboxes, these also being a 3 synchro rear wheel drive setup, of course. We'll put it together, make absolutely certain every gear is where it should be. None of these little delicate check balls and things have fallen out of place. I've seen them get inside, not quite go into the location they're supposed to, the hole in between shafts, and they end up trapped at the end of this, say behind the front piece, and you're locked out of a gear. There's a mystery. It won't go into one of the gears. Well, yeah, something's not going to let that rod move. All right, yeah, we're kind of burning what's left of the midnight oil here, working on this Ribcase Sprite gearbox. We showed a few tricks. Let's come back in here and show little details of how some of these ended up. Right in here, you can see the spacer that we installed on that shift rod, and over here one on the third fourth. As we explained, those prevent these from overextending. It physically stops the bronze fork here from moving far enough to have these sliders come apart. It's one failure that is a real deal killer for these things. Chance here, as we were about to button this one up for the most part, I'm showing a little trick. Let's stand it up on our stand. For getting these tail housings on. Now I know it's possible, because I've done it, you can wobble these as you're taking them apart to get the tail housing off, disengaging from the shift rods. It's a little tricky because of course you have this little Z-bar sort of a thing here that drops down and has to engage into these slots. And you could probably put it in one gear or another and wobble it in there, but it's tough to do when you've got a shim over here. We've got our 10,000 shim sitting here. Oftentimes there's a gasket, a shim. You're trying to put the shim in here. You're trying to keep it balanced. So if you have to jiggle this around, you run into some headaches. So here's what we do. You back these set screws out that hold the forks. Let's just open this up a little bit at the edge of where this makes contact, so you can see what we're doing in here. And then we'll just hold it, say, about there. See what I did here? So I pulled this one to the side. And that way. See, and just like that. Sort of in the neutral gate, and actually physically put the shifter on, shift it through the gears, and that way we can be 100% certain that when it goes into the Morris Minor, in this case, everything's going to work just as it is. Let me say one quick thing about the idea of having a little booklet like this when you're building these. This is actually my book from my years running the Mini Mania engine shop, where I built tons of these. And even for someone like me that, you know, could probably build one of these in their sleep, there's a lot of little bits and pieces inside these boxes. And sometimes you're like, is there a check ball here? Is that one got its set screw? It's just good to have a little reference like this. These are not rocket science, and if you're diligent and take your time and really think about how it has to work, I think a lot of people have the capability of doing this sort of work.